Welcome to another month of webinar from GTS Digital Formation. I'm the Reverend Colin Chapman, the curate here in Christchurch, New York, but also the digital missioner at GTS Digital Formation. This month, we're going to, I'm actually really excited about our program this month. This is something I've been working on in the back of my mind for a little while, some theories we've been talking about in person, but this is the first time we've really done a webinar on this. But today we're going to talk about getting the message out. Using 5 ways that you can talk about your church message in 2014. We're going to do a little bit of communications theory. We're going to see an example of good communications, good advertising, if you will. And then we're going to talk about how we can adapt some of the principles that we see every day around us into the church world. If this is your first webinar, welcome. If you're new to digital formation, we're part of the General Theological Seminary in New York, New York. We teach clergy and lay people alike on how to use social media, new media, the internet, technology, all these kind of fun buzzwords that you see, how to use them, how to use these tools for your church to get the message out, for evangelism, for advertising your events, whatever it may be. That's what we do here. If you haven't already, like us at facebook.com/digitalformation. And your best bet to stay in touch with us is our YouTube link, youtube.com/digitalformation. That's where you can watch old webinars as well as our quick how-to videos that we put up from time to time as well. If you're new to GoToWebinar, this can be a little tricky. Know that most of your windows are resizable, so you can play around with that. One thing to know, for whatever reason, I have never really understood how the chat room function works in GoToWebinar. So we have the questions section that I think all of you have. You can send me questions. I've already gotten one question, which I think is good to address right off the top. When you have access to the slides, we actually don't make the slides public, but we do put the entire YouTube, this whole webinar up on YouTube. The slides are really just a skeleton and really not much good without the explanation behind them. So that's why. It's just I prefer not to have something so sparse on the internet without some more meat behind it. So if you go to youtube.com/digitalformation sometime tomorrow, you can view this webinar again if you liked it so much. So we're going to move forward now. We've started some of these webinars talking a little bit theology. Sometimes we've done Bible. Today we're going to talk a little bit about more communication theory. Up front, I'm not a communications major. I'm not talking about anything I specifically know, just things I've read along the way, some terms and just some theories that work out there. There may be some of you out there that really like what you see, and you may want to read more. There may be some of you out there that know much more than I. Please feel free to contribute in the conversation through the questions. But I want to talk about a theory today called effective frequency. This is a theory in the communications world where there's many theories and models around, but essentially it's asking the question, how many times does someone need to hear something or see something before it really starts to soak in? How many times do you need to see an advertisement for a product before you want to buy it? How many times do you need to hear about an event before you remember it or before you want to go to it? How many times do you need to hear a message before you're interested in it? That's the real basic, this effective frequency theory. So it begs the question, how many times? Do you need to hear something 3 times? Do you need to hear something 5 times? 7 times? You can ask yourself how many times you think you need to hear something. What I find really interesting is back in 1885. Now, think about communication back in 1885. Today, we're going to talk about some communication that hasn't been around for more than 5 years. We're going now back, over 100 years ago. So this is a question that's been on the minds of communicators for a really long time. As church people, as evangelists, we are solely communicators of the gospel. But if you are a church leader, if you are clergy or a lay leader in your church, you're also a communicator for the programs, for the offerings, for what your church does in the community. So you have these two sides that make you a communicator, a marketer. I know sometimes we jar against those kind of words, communication, advertising, when it comes to evangelism. But at its root, the same principles apply. So bear with me as I use maybe some more that marketing jargon today. So again, 1885, Thomas Smith says, you need to hear something 20 times before you buy into it. That sounds like a lot, but think about some of the products that you've seen. Think about some of the products you've owned. How many times did you see someone with something, or see an advertisement on TV for something, or read a review about something, and before that little kindling in the back of your mind thought, oh, maybe this is something I want. There's truly something psychological to marketing, and they know that. That's what they do, and they do it very well. I want to load up here for a second Thomas Smith's 20 Ways. This link will be available under the YouTube. But you just see here, this was written, again, 1885. First time people look at any given ad, they don't see it. The second time, they don't notice it. The third time, they are aware that it's there. The fourth time, they have a fleeting sense that they've seen it somewhere before. I'm not going to read the whole list, but it goes on and on and on and on. The 18th time, they curse their poverty for not allowing them to buy this terrific product. That's how I feel currently about the iPad, right? The 19th time, they count their money very carefully. The 20th time, prospects see the ad and they buy what's being offered. You see, 20 times, and this is still this theory is still held pretty tightly in advertising. But we see it all over the place. I mean, you see it with technology, you see it with food, you see it all over the place. I thought we'd have a little fun today. We'd maybe tap into Hollywood. I was in the mall the other day and I saw posters for the Lego movie. This is a mall that I would typically expect to see posters for a family movie. It's kind of more of an adult mall, not a lot of kids stores in the mall. But I saw this ad for the Lego movie, and then I noticed it was playing on the screens. Then I noticed Lego movie tie-ins in various stores I was in. So here's this Lego movie, and I'm being bombarded with messages about the Lego movie coming out. Lego movie. So I just thought if I'd be really interested if you don't know about this movie. This is the first time that you've seen any publicity for the Lego movie. Say so in the questions. I'd love to know if this is the first time you're hearing about the Lego movie. Silence. So maybe I'll assume everyone has. See, good marketing on their part. All right, okay. So here are a few first timers, but it's still coming out in a few weeks, and also probably not our demographic and maybe not their target demographic. Tons of first timers. Okay, that's all right too. Good. It looks very funny for what it's worth. So if we go to YouTube, the Lego movie is put out by Warner Brothers. There is a trailer for the Lego movie.
Okay, and we're rolling, and the Lego movie.
I mean, it's really just a movie about Legos, right? But you'll see here on the side, there's not just one trailer for the Lego movie. There are multiple trailers for the Lego movie. They have different types of trailers out there because we start to grow numb to the first trailers that we see. So there's video of the Lego movie. There's print advertising for the Lego Movie. This is a print found in a video game catalog, a video game magazine. This is for the Lego game movie video game. So here's a print advertisement and a product tie-in. You see just multiple levels. There's a website for the Lego Movie. You see it on the bottom. If you look here on the bottom of this poster here, you'll see thelegomovie.com, facebook.com/the Lego Movie, hashtag the Lego Movie. This hashtag the Lego Movie, what's fun about that is that's Twitter. Most of the world knows now that hashtag means Twitter. It doesn't even need to say the word Twitter. You know, you can search hashtag the Lego Movie, and sure enough, there is a Twitter page. For the Lego Movie. It reminds me a while back when AOL, if anyone was on AOL, they had keywords for things. We need to only start saying keyword whatever, and people knew that meant America Online. You just would search America Online. These things become such commonplace nowadays. So you just see that all over the place. If the Lego Movie only advertised in movie theaters, the only people who would see it are people who go to movies. If they only advertised on Twitter, the only people who would see advertisements for people who use Twitter. Their range is large, so their marketing also has to be large. Finally, there's this viral category of videos. I thought I'd just talk about that. I'm sure there's some viral Lego Movie videos out there. A movie came out I think this Christmas, Anchorman 2. The production company of Anchorman 2 released something like 100 different viral videos out there. A viral video is a video that's meant to be spread because it's different. It's not a direct advertisement like a movie trailer. But what they did is they had characters from the film in local news studios. They had clips from them around the world, and they just plastered the internet with this marketing. A viral video is something that looks like it's from the real world, but often also is really just an advertisement for a movie. We could talk about viral video in church communications later. We're not going to talk too much about that today. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave your church, my church, the church that you work at? Clearly, we don't have the marketing budget of a giant Hollywood film. Warner Brothers has poured millions and millions of dollars into the marketing of the Lego Movie. It has to, because it has to make sure the investment of its money, of the time it took to make this film, pays off at the end. Now, what do we have as churches? There's a few things that we market. Certainly, we market our Christian message. We evangelize. But what about the other things? What about our church services? What about our organ concerts? Our Sunday school lessons? Anything that we have going on? What about those things that we put time and energy into that we want to make sure have a payoff in the end? Now, for us, it's not a financial payoff, but it's a payoff of our mission. We're putting our time and energy into these events in order to further our Christian mission and message. What are we then doing to ensure, in the same way that Warner Brothers ensures the success of the Lego Movie, and I guarantee you 3 weeks from now you're going to remember this webinar when it makes tons of money in the box office. What are we doing to ensure that our message is worth sending out there? I know I appreciate Thomas Smith and it's 20 ways that someone needs to hear something. We're not going to talk about the 20 times someone sees something today, because hopefully around your church they'll see or hear something close to 20 times. But I want to talk about the 5 ways that we can communicate our message out there today, 2014, with the tools that are out there, and with the audiences that we're trying to reach. Here's the difficulty about church. Who's our target? The Lego Movie's target's pretty clear, right? I mean, we're talking about kids and families with kids and maybe adults who like kind of kitschy humor. That's pretty narrow compared to our market as a church, which we're reaching out to. We want to make sure this is effective communication for teens. We want young adults. We want single adults in their 30s. We want young couples in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is. We want families. We want people who are nearing retirement. We want people who are in retirement. The the message, the audience for what we're doing on a Sunday is huge. No wonder churches struggle so much in getting their message out. So maybe it would be easier if we broke it down. We talk about 5 ways that we can reach out, and then we start to think, well, which audience is each communication tool focusing on? This is the end of the presentation. We're going to go through some live stuff in a minute. But here are the 5 things that we're going to talk about today. I apologize for the presentation not being in full screen. If I go full screen, you lose the video portion. So I want to talk about tried and true marketing. Print. I want to talk about web. I want to talk about email, and I want to talk about social media. Real quickly, what do I mean by these? Tried and true. I mean the things that we sometimes forget to do when we're worried about web, email, and social media. I mean print. I mean signs around your church. I mean bulletin boards. I mean the Sunday announcements. Those things that churches have been doing for years and years and years and years and years. Let's not forget about those when we start looking at these new media tools. Print marketing. What about our newsletters that we send out? What about our mailings? What about postcards if your church can afford it? Web. These are kind of building upon kind of the most basic, easiest things to do, and we kind of move up to some of the more scattershot. Web, church websites. We want to talk a little bit about church website and church website theory, philosophy. Email. We want to talk about mail a bit. And also, finally, we're going to end with social media, which is kind of the most ethereal of all of these, the newest, certainly, but I think one of the most important in terms of keeping church communication relevant in 2014. So let's get started along the way. One thing, we had a church concert here at my church here in Rye last week. We got the word out pretty well, but the turnout wasn't exactly what we thought it would be. One thing after we looked at what we did, we found that we forgot the plain ordinary print advertising. We didn't put up signs in the windows. We didn't put flyers in the back of the church. It wasn't very large in our newsletter. We did really well with email. We did well with our website. We did okay with social media, but we forgot the most basic communication. One thing I often do, maybe you do it too, when we start embracing these new technologies, is we can only hold on to so much, so we let some of the older ones fiddle out at the end. So it's important for us to remember our basics. It's not in the Book of Common Prayer, but many churches do it. Church announcements are huge. It's a time to welcome everyone who's there. It's a time to highlight those important things that are happening next week. You have a captive audience. They're listening. You can use it. Make sure you're using your church bulletin. If you have an announcement section, if you want to shy away from the in-person announcements on Sunday mornings, I understand. Put them in your church announcements. Make them look good. Make your bulletin something you can be proud of, something that you want to show. We're going to talk a little bit more about good, decent, vibrant print media in the next section. Don't be afraid to put things up on bulletin boards. Get your signs up there. Make posters, even if it's just a fluorescent "this is happening next week" poster. Let the people see it. This is your product that you've been working on, whatever it may be in your church. In the same way that the companies out there are working hard for these products to pay off, we want that to happen too. I want to move on and talk about newsletters for a second. Newsletters are sometimes a point of contention in churches. Um, Newsletters are that thing that you do every month that takes far more time than you think that it's worth. There's a demographic in our churches that still and will always rely on the monthly newsletter. Maybe not because it's the best way to communicate, but because that's been the tried and true method for so long. It takes a little bit of work. And if you have the time or the staff, make it look good. One thing that we found that worked really well here at Christ Church was I went into Apple Pages. It's their word processor. They had templates in there. I took one of their basic templates, I modified it a bit, and that's what we use every month. I took someone's idea out in Cupertino, California, or wherever for a decent looking newsletter, and we ran with that. We took something that looked kind of basic, something pedestrian, something amateurish, and turned it into a really nice newsletter with not a lot of work. If you're putting out newsletters, make sure you're getting good pictures. Print those pictures, even if they're in black and white. Get someone to your events with a decent camera or a point and shoot. Try to stay away from cell phone cameras, if you will. Put your pictures in there. This makes newsletters look vibrant. I want to go ahead and I want to show our newsletter for a second. One thing I'm a little hesitant to do in these webinars is highlight my own church too much, but I'm going to put my money where my mouth is this month and show off what we do for communication. It's not perfect, it's not the best, but I know that what we do is pretty effective and looks pretty decent. So this is a PDF of our newsletter. I'm just going to scroll down. This was our Christmas review. So we just put this with chock full of pictures. One of the guys in our congregation, he has a camera. He just takes pictures for us. It's one of the biggest blessings we have as communicators because we can send out pictures like this and people know what's going on. If you missed the Christmas services or you weren't there for all of it, you get this in your mailbox a few weeks after Christmas, and here you are. You get to relive the memories. Don't underestimate the power of a print photograph in 2014. Most photographs we see now are on the screen, on Facebook or whatever. It feels good to hold a piece of paper and look at a photograph. That touch goes along with our site in a way that enriches our experience. The question comes up, do we print this in color? No, we don't. We do print it in black and white. But what we do is we send this digitally to anyone who wants it digitally. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the email. So there's a chance to see these vibrant pictures on your computer, but it comes out in black and white. But even in black and white, it comes out pretty well. I'll tell you, anecdotally, when we put together this photo issue, we looked at how much it would cost to print it in color. The quote we got was humorous, and we quickly went back to black and white. There was no way we could afford Trinity Wall Street. We are not. Has anyone seen Trinity Wall Street's quarterly that they put out? Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous. So this is our newsletter. I'm kind of proud of it because I think it looks clean. You'll see there's a lot of the white spaces here, but all of this was stolen. This layout is 60 to 70% what Apple originally put together, and then I cleaned it up a little bit. So newsletters, very important. Don't forget your parish newsletter, because there's still an audience out there that loves getting something in the mail from their church, opening up and reading what their church is up to. The question comes as if we send the PDF newsletter. We do send the newsletter as a PDF, and I then email a link to the PDF, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in email. So we talked about print and we talked about newsletters, which is a little bit more solid of a print format. You're doing it once a month, maybe once every other month. And here we come to the website. The website is how many, almost most people will hear about your church today. If someone has moved into your town and they're looking for an Episcopal church, what they're going to do is Google Episcopal Church, the town I live in. Enter. They're going to see your website. Your website is the first impression someone's going to have of your church, which is real unfortunate, but it is the truth. Before 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this wasn't the case. Most first impression of churches were warm churchgoers who face to face at a town newcomer group said, "Hey, I belong to St. John's Church. You should come with me." That first impression of your church wasn't a static newsletter or a website, but it was a vibrant face. It just isn't the case anymore. So no pressure, but this is what we now need to work with. How do we make our web presence in such a way that it's a decent first impression? One thing that I try to do here with digital formation is to not assume money is there. Not everyone can print colored newsletters. Not everyone can make videos. But I still firmly believe that everyone can have a website. And there's a few ways of doing that. The most basic church website out there is to get in touch with the Episcopal Church. If we go to I'm going to Google the Episcopal Church. And we go here. The Episcopal Church offers websites for churches. They have a church finder. So I'm going to look for churches, browse by diocese. We're going to just go into Albany. I'm hoping to find here. This is the most basic of church websites, but it's clean. You see here that it has, they actually have their own website. Let's pretend they didn't. Oh, I click of the cathedral of all things. Let's go back. Here, Calvary Episcopal, Burnt Hills, New York. Here we go. Let's say Calvary Episcopal didn't have a website. They go online, and their information should already be here. If you go to the episcopalchurch.org or episcopalchurch.org, look for your church. You'll see that their page is here. You can then contact them and become the editor of this page, where you can then put your service times and everything up on here. If you don't have a church website, this is a great place to start, because if I Google Calvary Episcopal Church, Burnt Hills, and they didn't have their own website, I'd come here. But fortunately, they do have a website. Here's their website. Right away, well done, Calvary Episcopal Church, Burnt Hills. You click your website, you have times right here for your services. You have an address right here. A pretty good start. So if you don't have a website, or your website, for a long time, our website here was so out of date, it was almost immovable. We had to just shut it down and start from scratch. This is better than an out-of-date website. Something clean that has phone number, contact, service times, boom. Someone's ready to go. Let this be your church's first impression. If you want to take that one step further, there are plenty of free tools out there to make your own church website. A few you might have heard about. One that's pretty common, they advertise quite a bit, called Squarespace. I'll tell you, I've used Squarespace. I attempted to use Squarespace for our church. I find it very bulky and hard to use. We wound up going with a service called WordPress. WordPress is a very common website building tool that you can sign into and create a free website. The website it will give you is wordpress.com slash whatever it may be. But then you can then pay them to give you a URL. So if you wanted yourchurch.com or .org, probably, you can get that through them as well. We use WordPress for our website. Now, our website is a cheat. I'll tell you why our website cheats here at Christ Church in Rye, New York. We have a website, but secretly our website is based on a blog template. WordPress is primarily a blog building website, but we make ours kind of unabashedly look like a blog. And the benefit of having your website look like a blog, and I stand by this, is that when you come to our church, the most recent thing you're going to see is our first post. And as long as we're posting to this blog, our website looks current. So you sign on to ccra.org, you see our service times, our directions, and you click this link, brings you right to Google Maps, where many people are getting their directions from nowadays anyway. When's the last time you asked someone for directions and they said, well, turn left on 95 and then take the 4th exit? That drives me crazy. So we just click to get Google Maps, our service times right here, and then right away, last week's sermon. So our website's never more than a few days old. If you're interested in getting your sermons online, video or recordings, we have a digital short on that. If you go to youtube.com/digitalformation, you'll see a video on how you can inexpensively get your sermons up online, even just the audio. So play around out there. Get your website up to date. Think of your website as the first impression. And when you start thinking of your website as your first impression, that priority, how good your website should be, starts to rise on the list of those people who may be funding your website or may be reluctant to get that website going. Know your congregation. If you have anybody out there who can set this up for you, WordPress is easy enough that someone can set it up for you. If you're savvy enough to go to webinar, you're going to be savvy enough to update your website from time to time. Or if you want someone in your parish that can help you, that's a great way to do that too. I swear by this, if one of the best ways to get teens and young adults involved in your parish, they know this. They're digital natives. They grew up with this language. Get them involved in some of your communication. So that's websites. This is going to be a little bit like drinking water over a fire hose today. So bear with me. This is maybe a good webinar to watch twice. So we're moving on. We have still 2 more steps to go, and we'll do questions afterwards too. So I want to talk about email. Email is a blessing and a curse. If your email box is anything like mine, you get 20, 30, 40 emails a day. How many of those do you read? 5, 6, 7? A quarter of those emails, a tenth of the emails you get during the day. Emails are the things that I shut out first. One of the things about Gmail, if you use Gmail for your email, or if your church uses Google, it now kind of categorizes your email, so it sorts out the junk mail for you. The communication emails automatically goes to a screen that I have to choose now to see. But yet, email is still the primary way a large chunk of that target, our wide target, is communicating. So we still use email in the same way that newsletters may be clunky and take a lot of time to do. Email's really important for getting that out there. There's a few ways to email. The most cumbersome option is to just use your email client, make a distribution list and send that distribution list out and put a text email. You can do that. But there's some really nice content-rich or HTML email providers out there that you can sign up for. I know a lot of churches have Constant Contact, but A lot of churches have constant contact. Constant contact charges, and also kind of, even though they charge, they have a little banner on the bottom of your email. I don't think they look the best. I want to recommend to you all, and if I've already done this in a webinar in the past, I apologize, but I'm kind of hooked on this piece of software called MailChimp, MailChimp. They make making beautiful, content-rich email really easy to do. We're going to do a digital short on MailChimp in a few weeks. But in the meantime, if you don't have one already, just sign up. It's free to sign up. Play around with it. I'm going to show you again, and I apologize for plugging consistently our content. It's there. I know it. I can stand by it. This is what our email looks like. Real easy. You just drag pictures into a content editor. This is what our folks get in their email box. Now, what I also really like about MailChimp, so I'm going to shrink my browser down in such a way that it now thinks it's in mobile mode. So now I've shrunk my browser down. So now this is what it would look like if you load the email on an iPhone or an Android. MailChimp automatically can format your emails in such a way that you can load them on a tablet or a smartphone and see the same thing. We have our website and our Facebook link on our emails. We have links, so our emails are interactive. When we register new contacts or newcomers to our church, right away, the first thing, email address, get them on the email chain. This has become our church's primary way of getting email out, or getting the message out. Once you then have a database of the parishioners who are reading your emails, it's not just for messaging. We use email to get out to our parishioners in the case of an emergency. We use our email to contact emergency information during hurricanes and the blizzards. Hurricane Sandy, our email was very important for us here. So once you develop and get your email database together in a system, it's invaluable. One of the things I will warn to look out for with email is email allows us to do something that no other one of these communication tools allows us to do, but it allows us to track who's reading these emails. Every email I send out in MailChimp, I can then click a report in MailChimp, and it gives me a breakdown of how many users opened that email. Imagine if we were able to see that for our parish newsletters, is if trash cans had a sensor on them, and we knew how many newsletters were getting thrown into the trash can before they were opened, how many were opened, how long someone stayed on an article. These reports that MailChimp sends out tells me who's opened an email, but they'll also tell me who's clicked a link. And I can see it user by user. It's a little weird. I've had to stop looking at my reports because I was able to see which individual parishioners were not reading their newsletters. In a way, this was nice. So when someone would say, hey, I didn't know about the pancake breakfast we were having, I could then look and see, well, I saw you didn't open up your email. But it's almost like at that point, like knowing what someone pledges. I'd prefer not to know what and when people are reading their email because ignorance is truly bliss. I became a little obsessed about it. So you can go down that road at your own risk. So that's email. Check out MailChimp.com. Finally, and this is at the end because we don't have enough time to go into the entire world of social media. But again, I remind you, a movie, that's not the movie. Where we go? A movie has a Twitter page. I'm going to admit up front, I am the last person you want to listen to when someone's telling you should have a Twitter page. I am the worst Twitterer out there. I'm inconsistent. When I use it, and I don't. Don't listen to me about Twitter. I find it harder to use. If you're good at Twitter, fantastic. I'm not. I'm much better at Facebook, though. Our church also has a Facebook page. Facebook.com/CCRyanY. Anyone can see this page. If they're signed into Facebook or not, you'll see I'm not signed in right now, but I still see this page. I'm of the mind, and I know a lot of folks there aren't, so take this how you will. I'm of the mind that a Facebook page, facebook.com/your church's name, is better than an old looking website. If your website looks like it was made in the late 1990s, early 2000s, I say shut it down. Use Facebook. It's clean. It looks relevant. You're going to have easy access to updating your information. Our service times are right here, front and center. You get directions, and all this is free. I know you have the advertisement of Facebook. It waters down. I understand some of the pushback about using Facebook as your church's primary website, but I still think a cluttered looking Facebook page still looks cleaner than a website that looks like it was made, 10, 15 years ago. But these tools are useful to have, again, for sharing pictures, letting your congregation like the page and interact with each other. We post our sermons up here. We post events up here. Our Facebook has become a way that we've been kind of surprised at how we can interact with parishioners, even those who've moved far away and that still wants to stay in touch with us. Getting this up and running is a crucial way to both getting the word out, but also making your church look relevant in 2014. The fastest growing demographic on Facebook, you've probably heard this before, are 50, 60-year-olds, women more than men. But the fastest growing demographic are not teens. Unfortunately for us as communicators, teens are already moving away from Facebook. But more and more and more and more parishioners are using Facebook. So your church should be using it too. So I want to thank Megan Drew for this comment here. As a 22-year-old in the church, I see an old website. I immediately don't want to go. As a 22-year-old in the church, I see an old website. I don't want to go. Which church here has an overabundance of 22-year-olds that they're not worried about this comment? It's important. It's really important. But it's frustrating with how inconvenient it is. I can imagine you're out there thinking, well, this is why do they care about a website? The why isn't so much the problem. We can't change the why of communication, but you can change your church's website. Before we move on to questions and answers, a few disclaimers and sympathies, really. I know all of this takes time and money. And I know if there's two things most churches have out there is a shortage of time and money. Mostly time, mostly money. You can argue over which one we have less of. But this is kind of infrastructure, these kind of communication tools. Our goal as a church is not to simply exist, but it's to communicate and share. If your church is missing some of these fundamental pieces of communication in 2014, you need to think of it as your church is missing a roof or a basement. These are important and should not be passed up. 2, good communication tools does not substitute for bad communicators. No matter how bad of a communicator you are, Facebook does not make you a good communicator. That's my problem with Twitter. Having a Twitter does not make me all of a sudden a good communicator if I can't use those kind of tools. So be sure to get these tools into the hands of people you know who can use them. If you're in charge of communication and you know that an assistant or a volunteer can do it better than you, let it go. Let that person take control, take a hold of the communications for the better. I know that's a lot. I want to open the floor for some questions and answers, some comments, have a conversation going. Those are 5 ways, 5 kind of basic ways that you get the word out. And maybe if you get one or two of each, if you see a few signs and you get that email in your newsletter, maybe you start reaching up to that magic Thomas Smith 20, and you get someone who either wants to come to your church or has heard so much about your church that they think, well, I really need to check St. John's out. Or they think, well, you know what, that concert I wasn't really interested in. I heard enough people talking about it. I've seen enough places. Maybe I should go check it out. These are all uh, these communication methods are tried and true. Um, the best communicators are using them. We should too. Um, so we have some questions coming in. We'll have a one here. Weebly is also a great way to build a website. Very intuitive, broad amount of personalization without too much work. I'll be honest, I've never heard of Weebly. Let's just load it up. Weebly.com. Yeah, this looks really neat. Powerful site creator. This looks a lot like what Squarespace is up to. Kind of the same kind of custom drag and drop tools. I was way too much a control freak using Squarespace for it to work, but this looks like a really nice option. So yeah, play around with it. Maybe we can look at this a little more later on down the road. This is a good question. I'm going to throw this out here. See if if people can answer back. Norma would like to know who's the point person for digital communications at many churches. Do you have a single person through all communications must pass? Um, I can tell you that our communications here at Christ Church is a joint effort between myself and the parish administrator. The parish administrator sends out the email and does some of the Facebooking. I have access to the Facebook. I do the newsletter. It's a shared responsibility between the two of us. I'm sure there's a lot of churches where it's just the rector who's in charge of this kind of stuff, and so I'm sure volunteers are certainly needed. Anyone else? Does anyone else? Um, anyone else out there share responsibility for communications with the staff member? Are you in charge of your communications as a non-clergy person at your parish? Let us know. Can you speak briefly about any good examples of church Twitter you're aware of? Not particular churches, Christopher. That's a really good question. I know a lot of great religious organizations that use Twitter. I think the I Am Episcopalian feed that the Episcopal Church does a really good job. There are I can't remember it off the top of my head. There's a digital daily office. There's an abbey that prays the daily office through Twitter. I think that's a really neat way that that organizations have used Twitter. I know that now other churches will use Twitter simply as one more way to get the word out. They'll have a Twitter account that they kind of push the same information that we push on our Facebook page out through Twitter. What I find so frustrating about Twitter is Twitter truly is a stream, and you throw something out there. If you're not in the stream to catch it right away, you're going to miss it. Um, so, but I'm sure there are churches out there that do a really good job with it. I don't, unfortunately, spend enough time on Twitter to be able to tell you them. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to load up here Diocese of Rift Valley .weebly.com. Looks like a website that was done through Weebly. Oh, look at this. I mean, this is clean. Is there? I would love. Contact us right here off the top. I would love a phone number right where I could see it. But this is, I mean, if this is free and easy to use, I mean, you can use this too. I like the way the menus work. Um, I noticed on your Facebook page you had an email sign up app. How can I add that to my Facebook page? Good question. That is a MailChimp tool. If you're using if you're using um, MailChimp, there's a Facebook plugin. So I then click that and it brings me to this page. I now can sign up to my church's email list from here. Again, I don't need to be signed into Facebook to have access to this. This is completely public. Um, One thing I didn't mention on the Facebook when talking about it is you'll notice my URL right here is facebook.com/ccryany. I was able to choose that. That's a feature of Facebook. Before, when you first start your Facebook page, you're going to have a very long, complicated URL. You go to Facebook and then get a shorter URL for your organization. Luis says, our newsletter is sent through Constant Contact. Looks like your newsletter is mailed as PDF and you use MailChimp for email communications, not as an alternative method to send out the newsletter. Is that correct? That's true. We use, I send out our newsletter through a PDF that's hosted on WordPress. So I just send an email that's embedded with the link from our newsletter. I don't have experience using Constant Contact for sending out newsletters. Um, I'd love to see what yours look like though. If you can post a URL to it on the bottom in the questions, we can check it out. Patty Littman. Patty Littman responded to the question, "Who's doing your communications?" Patty, what respond to the questions? Are you the rector of your parish? Are you the parish administrator? Are you just kind of the digital junkie who volunteers their time? Yeah, the parish admin. Great. God bless you for all that you do. Holy cow. Unsung heroes, I tell you. But yeah, so your parish administrator, it's how lucky your parish is to have you who understands this or is willing to learn more about it. I think that's really helpful. Um, Jen here posted that she's from St. Albans. She's a volunteer. She works hand in hand with the parish administrator. Norma mentions that she finds a reluctance to use volunteers to have the skills to take on specific tasks. A reluctance in clergy to let go of control. Probably not the first time we've heard of this. This symptom that spreads through the church. But if you're missing some of those important foundations of communication, you're not willing to let go of control for that to happen, that's a problem. You mentioned that youngsters are moving away from Facebook. What are they using instead? Everything and anything. It's right now the post-Facebook market. That's a great question, Marta. The post-Facebook market, it's almost kind of like the gold rush. Most people, I mean, Instagram, people are using Instagram. People are using things like Snapchat, which unfortunately in the news gets kind of you only hear about Snapchat when you hear about teens emailing risky pictures to each other, but they're using Snapchat. They're using a lot of messaging tools like Quick and WhatsApp and Google Hangout. They're just kind of messaging instead of posting. Tumblr. Unfortunately for teens, Facebook has become uncool because all the parents are on it. I know a lot of my teens here at the church changed their names come college application time because they know colleges are looking at their Facebook pages. So Facebook pages with oversharing become more of a liability than a tool for many teens. But I don't think Facebook's going anywhere anytime soon. But I think teens are kind of moving away. Bishop Goff Dyches, Virginia has a great Twitter. I'll tell you that the question of any churches that are using Facebook or using Twitter, I don't know many churches. I know of many individuals that are using Twitter very well. A lot of bishops use Twitter really well. A lot of priests use this kind of a Twitter group of Episcopal priests who kind of chat with each other on Facebook. When you kind of get involved in that, there are a lot of priests who understand Twitter out there, and they talk about their church. They open up conversations about theology. It's not so much a marketing tool, say, hey, come to my parish on Sundays, but certainly they become little micro celebrities in the Episcopal church kind of tech market. Are there any security concerns about names and faces, especially children, on church Facebook pages? Pat, thank you for bringing that up. I would have completely forgotten that. We have a waiver that all of our children sign, all parents sign in our Sunday school packets, that that their kids' faces can be used for parish marketing. Our church photographer, you'll see, I think I'm going to load our pictures here. We try not to take too many pictures of children. The children that we know are that we post are parishioners that we know are very comfortable with this, or that's my baby. So if we don't know a parishioner well, we won't use their child for too much marketing. But for Sunday school, we do make them sign a waiver that it's okay for publicity's sake. So make sure you're doing that. We have had, particularly in our nursery school, we've had a family that has been asked not to be photographed, and we just make sure when there's events like that, we know who those people are. Vine, yeah, right. Going back to the conversation, what do teens use? They use Vine, they use Tumblr, GroupMe, Instagram video, anything out there. They just kind of share and share and share and share. That was a lot. Thank you for an engaging and wonderful question and answer. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for just being here. This was a really exciting webinar. Like I said, I've been this kind of 5 communications tools is something that's been in the back of my mind for a little while. I really appreciate you all stopping by. Before you leave, always remember gts.edu/digital formation. We have more webinars coming up. Our next webinar is February 13th. This one was a huge hit when we did it last year, so please come back for it. Mobile apps for ministry. What was different, I guess, 2 years ago when we did it is I owned an iPhone then, and I only knew iPhone apps. We got a lot of pushback from Android users. What Android apps are there out for ministry? I have an Android phone now, so we're going to talk about iOS tools, but we're also going to talk about Android tools as well. And then on March 13th, the last one this year, we're going to talk a little bit more about social media in the church today. Thank you all very much. Again, I'm Colin Chapman, the curate here in Christchurch Rye, digital missioner at General Seminary. This is a lot of fun, and we'll see you all around. Take care.